Well, once again, there have been constant calls for interest rates to be reduced as a result of a cost of living increases and housing affordability concerns. So when a property professional suggests to us that interest rates need to go up before they come down, we sit up and listen. And listen today is what we did, as Bushy spoke to Robert Mandanici from Paddington Realty in WA.
Government have a lever where they can take the foot off the gas just a little bit and let the RBA do their job.
50 years ago, the majority of Aussie families lived in 3-bedroom, 1 living, 1 bathroom homes on 1,000 square metres. Today, the predominant housing type is twice the house on half the block size. So how do you invest for the future? Well, Bushy gets some answers on that from Aman Sethi, a successful property investor who has amassed a $10 million portfolio in the last 4 years. Before we start, I want to thank our supporters and content partners, realty.com.au, BMT Tax Depreciation, Know-How Property Finance, Get Rare Property, and Apira Marketing. You'll find us on all podcast players as The Property Hub, also on the Southern Cross Oz Stereo Network, Hot Copper, and on all social media platforms.
Finding the perfect investment property shouldn't be stressful. At realty.com.au, we connect you with expert buyer's agents who do all the hard work for you. Whether you're buying your first property or adding to your portfolio, our trusted buyer's agents will guide you every step of the way. Realty.com.au, your gateway to the investment property of your dreams. Find your perfect buyer's agent today. Visit realty.com.au now to get started.
Realty Talk and your host, Bushy Martin.
Now, since interest rates started rising from their record lows and the COVID settings way back in May 2022, which was an attempt to quell post-pandemic runaway inflation, the cash rate has jumped 13 times from 0.1% to the current rate of 4.35%, which is actually the biggest leap in 30 years. And it's been sitting on that level now since November 2023. As a result, there's been constant calls for interest rates to be reduced as a result of the cost of living increases and housing affordability concerns. In fact, at the date of recording, there's been more mass media calls for interest rate drops as a result of global recession concerns driven by economic challenges and share market corrections right across the Western world. So when we hear a shot in the dark from a property professional who's suggesting that interest rates need to go up before they go down, we sit up and listen. And Rob Mandanici from Paddington Realty in WA joins me now to unpack his reasoning. So welcome to Realty Talk, Rob.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks very much, Bushy. Interesting way you put it there. I think, it's probably we'll put a cat among the pigeons, but that's okay. I'm happy to stand by that.
Well, I having done a bit of research on your background, I know you're going to have some good reasons for it, but I guess to set the scene, Rob, can you start by sharing your read on what impact, if any, rising interest rates have had since they started increasing way back in May 2022?
Yeah, look, we all know the theory. Rising rates should curtail inflation, but I just don't think we're seeing inflation fall fast enough. And I come from the position where it's not households who aren't doing the heavy lifting. The burden is significantly on households, and I don't think there's any secret. The burden, I think, affects younger people more than anyone. That burden of younger renters and people trying to get a start in the housing market. I'm almost at the position now where I'm saying, they probably just need to tip up just that little bit more, before they come down. And I think the biggest one there is households are doing the heavy lifting. Consumers, to some degree, are doing the heavy lifting. But government just keeps spending. And, government have a lever where they can take the foot off the gas just a little bit and let the RBA do their job. And, I think the timing couldn't be better. We've had a RBA monetary statement put out today, obviously, rates on hold again. I'm going to change my tack a little bit and say it would have been the right call today, I think, in light of the last 24 hours and worldwide market events. But ultimately, you even see in that statement today, the RBA still holds some concerns around underlying inflation that they just can't shake out.
Yeah, no, very good comments. Well, again, to set some context there, Rob, Do you think increased costs and reduced borrowing capacities and the related purchase price power that have really resulted from the increases in rates in recent times have had any influence on sales activity?
Oh, look, some influence in some suburbs, definitely. So, just speaking from experience in Perth and let's say some of the outer northern suburbs, we've at least seen some purchasing power decrease. Those still, though, with substantial savings, in a good position can still make it happen, even with the banks perhaps, loading a bit of margin in on, when they're doing their assessments of interest rates. A lot of what we're finding, though, some of those younger entrants where, say, 6 months ago, where rates were then, they could have afforded and they could have made the purchase, now can't, not because of runaway house prices, but just because of that margin. And, we're still seeing a lot of banks saying, they're not saying no, they're just saying no, not now. So we're seeing a lot of that still, I think, happening where they're saying to a lot of younger entrants and first-time entrants, you're a good credit risk. You've got a good record. You've got a good job. You've got a good savings history. You just need to find a little bit more cash or wait it out.
Yeah, well
That's
said.
the feedback.
Yeah, let's sort of, and you've touched on this already, but flowing into rental conditions, the impacts of interest rate hikes on that, what are you seeing on the ground in WA?
Look, so I think we've finally started to see a little bit of a ceiling. I think we've got to a point where, tenants are definitely pushing back and saying, look, I can't afford that. We're seeing that, and on a personal level in my own office, I'm starting to see that when it comes to lease renewals. So I've had about half a dozen lease renewals this week, and a good proportion of those tenants are saying, look, we acknowledge that costs have risen, rates, insurance, taxes and everything, but we're just at a point now where we can't afford any more. Or, look, thank you to the owner. I had one recently, look, a $90 increase, and he just said, look, I can't do 90. I can do 70. He said, so if the owner will accept 70, I'm more than happy to do that deal. And look, the owner said, that's absolutely fine. Appreciate it. They've been a long-term tenant. They've got a good track record. Let's not, cut off the nose to spite the face. But we're seeing a lot more of that pushback and a lot more of those conversations happening. And I just think we've just started to hit a ceiling with rents.
Yeah, okay. Well, let's now dive deep into the topic of the minute and expand on your thoughts on why interest rates need to go up further before they actually start coming down.
So, look, I'll caveat that with interest rates need to go up further if the government does nothing. And that we've got a federal government in particular, they've done a few things. Now, they've talked about bringing down energy prices, but their solution to that was a direct cash injection. The moment you put cash in people's pockets, whether you credit it to their energy bill or you make a payment through the payment transfer system, whether it's the tax system or Centrelink or family tax benefit, they spend the money. Even in my own household, I'm going to get a couple of $100 off my power bill, so I can probably afford to go out to dinner next week and have an extra meal out. People do that. It doesn't matter what age you are. It doesn't matter what income level or socioeconomic background you're from. The perfect example, the baby bonuses. I mean, sure, they increased the birth rate. They did their job, but they also put a lot of cash in the economy, and that's what we're seeing now. We couple that with the tax cut package. Now, whether you believe in the stage 3 tax cuts or the delay of those, however they carved it up and changed it, that's beside the point. A tax cut is inflationary. Now, I'm not against tax cuts, but you take tax cuts, you couple it with energy credits, and you couple it with all these other false stimuli that the government's putting out there, and it does nothing. It does nothing but fuel inflation. So do I want to see families get slugged with another 25-point rate rise? Absolutely not. But if the government doesn't, ship up and really stop spending, then the RBA only has one lever with monetary policy. They can't do anything else.
Exactly right. Well, let's dive into that a little bit because I think your qualification is really important if the government doesn't do anything else. Because let's face it, putting the burden of spending and inflation on the 30% of people who have home loans is not really a very well-directed measure anyway in the context of a broad-based impact on fluctuating the spending patterns. What are your thoughts on what other alternatives that the government has, and what other measures should we be perhaps looking at rather than relying on rates to do all the work?
Yeah, look, I think governments have to be very careful with, and I'll use the term big builds. I think, that's a very Victorian term, that one, the big build project, roads and tunnels and rail. I think, and again, and not just levelling this at the feds, state governments, have done a great job at causing some of these issues. And, a lot of those are demand-driven issues where, they're taking, skilled labour and taking that on very large government projects with very hefty payrolls. And, again, making it difficult for the rest of us to find trades. You get something done in your own home, or we get something done on a client's rental property, and it is difficult to quite often to find people to do the work. So there are those demand drivers as well out there that, have that effect and just keep pushing up prices. So you've got big build projects. You've got government sort of, spreading money, but spreading it perhaps the wrong way. And I think they've got to be more targeted. They've got to be more targeted. Give the help to those that genuinely need it and provide incentive to the rest of us who would do more hours. And we look at, there are people of an older generation who are self-funded who would be happy to do more work, perhaps with a concessional tax treatment, and they'd contribute to the economy that way. That's a very good way, I think, of also fixing the skills shortage, which in turn, that shortage, bringing in more people. And I'm not against immigration. I'm against bringing people in where we can't house them. So we have a skills shortage. We need those people. We bring them in, and that, again, we need immigration to survive. But we're literally bringing people here with no homes. So we've sort of got this real vicious cycle, issue that and every state, I think, is struggling with that at the moment.
Yeah, 100%. Okay, well, let's now turn to the reality, and we've just seen the RBA leave rates on. Sort of jumping into the future a little bit, what's your read based on what you're seeing? And again, this is crystal balling, and there's 1,000 different dynamics that are likely to impact on this. What's your read on what the RBA will actually do when it comes to interest rates in the context of the continued global and national uncertainty and economic challenges that we face?
So look, 48 hours ago, I would have still been pretty bullish on a rate rise this month or next month.
Yeah.
Now looking at things, I almost reversed that position this morning, saying I could almost see a very cohesive argument for a cut. I think they've actually made this is probably the first right call I think they've made for, a good couple of months in a hold. And, there is significant uncertainty. There is something wrong right now in equity markets where, it was a bear market yesterday at about 13%, and pardon me, and a bull market today at about 10. So there's global uncertainty, obviously around Iran and Israel and other Middle East players. You've still got issues in Ukraine and Russia. And look, people say, look, they're so far away, it doesn't affect us. Well, it does. And the world is very well connected. And I think the flip side of that, we're going to see more people want to come to Australia, and why wouldn't they? I mean, it's a good country. We all know that. We've got some faults, but by and large, a bloody good place to live. We all know that. But bringing that back to sort of crystal balling here, and I think some commentary in the RBA, I think they've basically said, we reserve all rights, was basically the governor's statement today. She was very much line ball on everything. I think you can read into everything she didn't say, and nothing's off the table.
Yeah.
And she said that. She said nothing's off the table today. And I suspect they would have been close today. And I'd gather they're still balancing that concern of, and concern I would have out there is liquidity versus growth. And if growth really does stall, and she pointed at some commentary around China and economic growth in China, and further stalling there, so I think it's going to be a very fine line. I think today sends a signal to the property market that property is still safe. I'd hate to see what signal a rate cut sends. I mean, that will go wild. But I think it's good enough today. Every time we get a hold decision, the phone rings again. People get an interest in buying. I've had multiple buyer agents on the phone already today sort of saying, well, what have you got? What's coming up? What are your maybes? Have you got some investors ready to move on? people of a retirement age? Is there anyone we can convince to part with their property? So, it's a good thing.
Very well said, and you're absolutely right. In the interconnected world that we now live in, which is instant everywhere, if the rest of the world gets a headache, we need to take an aspirin, Rob. There's no question about it. So, look, I really want to thank you for the quite thought-provoking and somewhat contrarian views, which I think are right on the money in the context of the world that we currently play in, and it certainly reinforces the need to be very careful and strategic in relation to what we're doing in the property sphere. And we really appreciate you sharing all of this with us on the Property Hub today. So thanks again for joining us, Rob.
Thanks very much.
Successful property investment is a game of finance. Do you have the right team and the right game plan? Realty Talk is brought to you by Know How Property. More than mortgage brokers, Bushy Martin and his team of investment architects set you up with a sustainable strategy structured to lower your costs, tax, risk and stress while increasing your capacity for growth. Know How has helped over 1,900 homeowners and investors secure more than $800 million in property wealth. So get set to live more, work less, and live your legacy. Want to know how to invest in your freedom? Visit knowhowproperty.com.au.
This is Realty Talk, powered by realty.com.au.
Now, 50 years ago, the majority of Aussie families lived in 3-bedroom, 1 living, 1 bathroom homes on 1,000 square metre quarter-acre blocks in the suburbs. 30 years later, the predominant housing type was 4-bedroom, double living, 2-bathroom, double garage homes with outdoor al frescoes on 500 square metre blocks. So twice the house on half the block size. And today, 2 to 3 bedroom, double bath villas, townhouses and apartments that come with or are close to community and lifestyle facilities are experiencing increasing demand. Now, there's no doubt that the changing popularity and preference for different housing types has been affected by affordability over time, but there's more to it than this. And if you dig deeper, increases in the proportion of overseas-born migrants is having a growing influence on housing types, styles, locations and configuration. And if you're to be a successful property investor, you need to focus on scarcity. So you need to be securing property types and locations that are in the sweet spot of demand and appeal, both now and in the future. So what does the future profile of housing look like? Well, given the growing influence of cultural diversity on the cosmopolitan nature of our housing, to discuss this, we're joined by Aman Sethi, a successful property investor who has amassed a $10 million portfolio in just 4 years, and is also the founder of Jig's migrant talent business, who we interviewed on the Property Hub's Get Invested podcast on episodes 336 and 337 not long ago. So welcome to Realty Talk, Aman.
Great to be here again. How are you?
Awesome. I really enjoyed our chats recently, and given your involvement both as a hands-on investor but also intimately involved in the migration sphere, I thought very opportune to get you back and get a hands-on perspective of this issue, given its sort of growing influence. And I guess to set the scene around that, since World War II, the proportion of the Australian population born overseas has actually been increasing pretty steadily, from about 10% to now over 30% and growing, which is actually the first time this high proportion has occurred since way back in 1893, would you believe? So of our 27 million odd national population, well in excess of 8 million are now overseas born migrants. So it's no surprise that Australia is proudly known as the migrant nation. So to dig a bit deeper into that subject, I'd like you to sort of start by sharing some more migrant demographic stats, particularly in relation to trends in the numbers and ratio of migrants in terms of where they're coming from, and also where they're choosing to live locally. Can you put a little bit of colour around that for us?
Yeah, definitely. From a migration point of view, most of them, as you may already expect, they come towards the East Coast. So I think New South Wales is definitely the biggest. So Sydney and Melbourne are not far behind. And, the reason for that is obviously the job market. it's much easier to find jobs because the market is a lot bigger in those areas. And Brisbane and Queensland is starting to really catch up and develop that job market phase as well. And then obviously you have the smaller markets like Perth and Adelaide, and they're starting to grow as well. And I think that's one perspective. I think the other perspective is that some of these cities have already got a diverse demographic, and when migrants first come here, they want to go somewhere where, yes, it's a new place and it's exciting, but there's also some level of familiarity, attached to where they're going, and that's probably one of the other reasons that I think comes into people's thinking when they're making the move internationally.
Yeah, very well said. I think the latest stats I saw suggested that about 87% of permanent migrants live in capital cities, and well over half of the permanent migrants are residing in both Sydney and Greater Melbourne. So a big concentration there. Have you got any thoughts around the changing origin destinations for migrants? Because, traditionally Australia, they have a lot of people come from England, but I know that in recent times, India, China, New Zealand, and areas like Philippines, Vietnam and Malaysia, etc., are seeing a much bigger increase in those coming in. What's your read and experience on that front?
Yeah, definitely. Look, we have seen a bit of a change from that perspective, and definitely, I think India and Australia, the relations are strengthening, and that has an impact in terms of the confidence levels of migrants from there as well. Obviously, there was some challenges with China and so forth, and I think that's obviously being worked through now. So yeah, it is changing, and definitely, like you mentioned, Philippines, Vietnam, Thailand, we're starting to see a lot of people come to Australia, and I think that is going to continue. I mean, given that if you look at say the other countries around the world, like the US or Canada or UK, I mean, there is some challenges that are sometimes a lot more significant than the Australian challenges, and because of that reason, Australia, I think, will grow in popularity even more over the coming years as the right mix of lifestyle and also the work culture as well.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, I guess sort of given the cultural differences and expectations on where migrants are coming from, and we know that a lot of migrants initially rent before they're in a position or want to buy a property. What's your understanding and experience in terms of the type of accommodation that migrants from the major countries are generally looking to rent? You got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I can talk a little bit about my personal experience because, we were pretty much the same. We came here as migrants many years ago now, and we were renting initially in an apartment. And, what we were looking for was, yes, something that was convenient, something with good public transport into the city for the work opportunities, something where we had things like, I guess, an Indian shop nearby and some sort of Indian community there. We didn't really want to go into the, specific, like a little India or something like that. We didn't want to go into that zone because we still wanted something different, but we wanted, some level of comfort that, we would be able to, interact with people and go to grocery shopping for some of the things that, kind of have that comfort element attached. So, I'm guessing it's pretty much the same. I mean, when I speak to migrants now, they are very similar. It's rare, for example, for a subcontinental person to, come to Australia and start living in the eastern suburbs next to the beach. So it does happen, but it's rare. In Sydney, for example, they live in more, diverse areas, like whether it's Parramatta or Hornsby or Strathfield, more areas that are, quite central, but also affordable and, bring that familiarity to the table as well.
Yeah, I guess if we look at the initial shift from rentals to owning homes, have you got any thoughts on the type of homes that particularly the more recent migrants from other countries are generally looking to buy and where that might be?
Yeah, look, I think again, and you touched on this earlier, that cost is a big thing. So for most migrants, getting that $2 to $3 million home as your first property purchase is something out of the budget. And if they're looking at more the 500 to say 1.5 mil maximum, you're still looking at either you need to go, really far from the CBD to get a house with land and, 4 or 5 bedrooms. Otherwise, you're looking at, a 2 or 3 better apartment, which is more central and conveniently located. So I think, people are going more towards that direction.
Yeah, no, that's good. I guess with the increasing ratio of migrants making up our increasingly cosmopolitan and diverse community, what influence do you think this is likely to have on housing types and locations, both now, but more importantly, in the future, as you see it?
Yep. So I think, look, there was a temporary shift as part of COVID towards, the 4 and the 5 bedders, and because people started working from home, they needed the extra space, and I think there was definitely a boom in that space in terms of demand, not only for purchasing but also for renting as well, because people needed that extra space. And I think I don't think it's a long-term trend. I think now that more companies are getting people back into the office, and there's a strong push from a broader economy perspective to get back to our pre-COVID methods. I think that will again change towards people looking for more the convenient 2 and 3 bedders, like you mentioned earlier, and being centrally located, and I think people are a lot more time conscious these days, and they generally speaking, people are not in that zone where they want to travel for 2 hours, 3 hours back and forth every day. They'd rather keep it to a maximum 20-30 minutes, and I think that's going to play a big part in terms of that change in the demand long term.
Yeah, 100% agree. I'd certainly, right across the board, Australian-born as well as overseas-born Australians are moving to a more low-maintenance lifestyle that's focused on the lifestyle elements where they can get out and enjoy and mix rather than be spending time cleaning the house or looking after the garden. And I think that sort of trend is going to continue. And I also think that the size of the family units has been decreasing pretty steadily in Australia now for quite some time. I think we've seen a 40% drop in the family unit size over the last few decades, which is, of course, leading towards smaller, more compact properties that have all the mod cons and are great places to live, but not having acres of space and massive yards that they need to worry about, and therefore can be a bit closer to the action in terms of those lifestyle amenities. Does that ring pretty true from what you were saying?
Yeah, definitely. I would agree with that. And people, they don't necessarily want to spend 1.5, 2 hours, doing the lawn mowing every 3 or 4 weeks and things like that. So people are, definitely moving towards convenience. And I think that's just not only in housing, but across the board, with everything's at your fingertips now, Uber Eats, and, everything is Amazon Prime delivery. I want it now. So all those things are, I think the general, demographic is moving in that direction.
Yeah, perfect. Given you're sort of actively assisting migrants arriving in the country into jobs and furthering their careers, is there anything that you or your team are picking up in relation to their aspirations and expectations around the housing element that you think is going to influence what happens in the housing market?
Look, on that note, not very specifically. I guess we engage with the migrant community in more the early stages. So when they're coming here, obviously going through their visa process, assisting them through that journey, and then them coming here and looking for their job prospects and so forth. So they're probably 3 to 5 years away from actually buying something. At that stage when we're really engaging with them, they're just starting to get their footing and so forth. But I think one thing people are looking at and is that which suburb they're living in, which area they're living in, and I think the preference to kind of choose that proactively when they first arrive is with the level of information and the level of research that's available now. So people are definitely kind of going with a mindset that if I start living here, this could be, my location for the next, 10, 15 years. And so they are being a little bit more strategic and doing that research up front.
Yeah, no, well said. I sort of want to turn now to your perspective from a property investor's point of view. And, you've been very successful in building a pretty substantial portfolio in a fairly short space of time and diversifying that portfolio across the country. Using your glasses and looking at migrant trends and its impact on housing discussed, how does that influence your thinking from a property investor's perspective?
Yep. Look, it's not something I've given, extreme thought into, I guess. It's always been, for me, the prevalent thought that's stuck in my head is, land appreciates and in value over time and buildings depreciate in value over time. So if you're asking me purely from a, investment point of view, that's been the prevalent thought that why we've, the core investment properties we've bought have all been on, standalone land, and with the independent house on top of that. Over time, is the demographic change and the preference change going to cause a significant shift to that formula not working? Look, I have my doubts. I think there will be a correction where, obviously house prices and independent house prices have gone up extremely well as compared to apartments. I think there will be a correction to some degree to get them back into, the right sort of parallels. But I don't think, there's going to be a negligible demand for houses. Let's put it that way. I think people still, there's enough people in Australia that want the backyard, that want the barbecue, that want their pets and, a couple of kids running around. And I think, that's not going away anytime soon. So I don't think there's going to be a major decline in that demand as well.
Totally agree. And I think there is, you're right on the money. There's a little bit of catch up. There's been such an undersupply of apartments, particularly along the eastern coast, that some of those apartments in high demand areas and the right profile of apartments are enjoying some pretty good capital growth in the short to medium term. But the water's finding its level again. And once we get back into the fundamentals, the big appeal of Australia is the space that we get to enjoy. And the opportunity to have a piece of that yourself, that's big enough to enjoy that with a family, but still be in close proximity to all the lifestyle facilities is I think, a big benefit for housing in Australia, pretty much right across the country. So, look, I really want to thank you for coming on to share your insights on it. And it is quite clear that property investors do need to be taking into account the subtle changes in housing preferences that are being driven by our ever-increasing overseas-born population as we move forward. And thanks again for joining us on the show today, Alan.
No problem. My pleasure. Nice to talk once again.
Property deductions can save you thousands of dollars each year. To make sure you maximise deductions, you need to work with the most experienced quantity surveyor in the country. BMT Tax Depreciation is the leading specialist in the industry. They've completed over 700,000 tax deduction schedules for residential investment and commercial properties Australia-wide. BMT guarantee to find double your fee in the first full financial year deductions. Call BMT on 1300 728 726 today for an obligation-free quote.
Unlock bonus content now as a premium subscriber.
Join us for more property news each week with Realty Talk and get invested. You can do that by subscribing to The Property Hub on all podcast players. Join the conversation on Facebook. Just search for The Property Hub Collective and give us a like and make sure you follow. Thanks to our supporters and content partners, realty.com.au, BMT Tax Depreciation, Know How Property Finance, Get Rare Property, and Apiro Marketing. Until next week, all the best.